So where we left off, Krishna has decided to visit Hastinapur. The messenger of the 20,000 kings came to the Sudharma assembly hall, and as a messenger of the kings requested Lord Krishna to please save them, because they were going to be sacrificed by Jarasandha to Lord Shiva in his form as Mahabhairava. At the same time, Narada Muni arrived in the assembly hall, informing Krishna that Yudhishthir wants Krishna to attend the Rajasuya sacrifice, which Yudhishthir wants to perform. And today, in today's episode, we will see why Yudhishthir wants to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. So since two different proposals arrived in front of Krishna at the same time, in order to glorify his devotee Uddhava, Krishna requested Uddhava to give his decision. What should Krishna do? Go take care of Jarasandha and rescue the 20,000 kings, or go to Hastinapur and attend Yudhishthir's Rajasuya sacrifice? And of course, Uddhava, being a disciple of Brihaspati, who is the guru for all the demigods, and Uddhava being of high intelligence, told everybody that, first of all, Yudhishthir cannot perform the Rajasuya sacrifice, declaring himself emperor of the world, until all the other kings had subjugated themselves. And it was known that Jarasandha was never going to become subservient to Yudhishthir, because Jarasandha was a demon. So Uddhava said, first we have to kill Jarasandha, then Yudhishthir can perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. So in our last episode, Krishna, his queens, and so many members of Dwaraka went on an excursion, and they arrived in Hastinapur. So now we pick up from where we left off. In the great assembly of respectable citizens, friends, relatives, brahmanas, sages, kshatriyas, and vaishyas, and in the presence of all, including his brothers, King Yudhishthir directly addressed Lord Krishna as follows. My dear Lord Krishna, the sacrifice known as the Rajasuya Yajna is to be performed by the emperor, and it is considered to be the king of all sacrifices. For by performing this sacrifice, I wish to satisfy all the demigods who are only your empowered representatives within this material world. And I wish that you kindly help me in this great adventure, so that it may be successfully executed. So right here, I'd like to point out that Yudhishthir is not confused. He actually understands the conclusion of the Vedas. He's not a hodgepodge who thinks that all the demigods are independent and equal or greater than Krishna. As he said here, they are all your empowered representatives. So that is the proper understanding of all the demigods. Brahma, Shiva, Durga, Ganesh, all the devatas are simply Krishna's empowered representatives. So that's an important item to come to agreement. Let us continue. Yudhishthir continues. Now, as far as we Pandavas are concerned, we have nothing to ask from the demigods, for we are personally fully satisfied to be your devotees. As it is said in Bhagavad Gita, Kamaistaistaya Kritagyana Prapadyante Anya Devata. Only persons bewildered by material desires worship the demigods for temporary and limited benedictions. But my purpose is different. I want to perform this Rajasuya sacrifice and invite the demigods to show definitely that the demigods have no power independent of you, for they are all your servants, and that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it was asked last week, how do the Pandavas accept and see Krishna? So it's obvious. Yudhishthira here makes his consciousness very clear. He knows that Krishna is the Supreme, and that nobody is independent or superior to Krishna. The Sanskrit word is asammaudva. One of the most important lessons that one has to accept in order to actually understand Vedanta correctly is that Krishna is asammaudva. No exceptions is equal to or greater than Krishna. Yudhishthira continues. Foolish persons with a poor fund of knowledge consider you, Krishna, to be an ordinary human being. Sometimes they try to find fault in you, and sometimes they defame you. Therefore, I wish to perform this Rajasuya sacrifice. I wish to invite all the demigods, beginning from Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and all the other exalted chiefs of the heavenly planets. And in that great assembly of demigods from all parts of the universe, I want to substantiate that you, Krishna, are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that everyone is your servant. So, Yudhishthira said here that foolish persons consider Krishna to be an ordinary human being. Krishna himself said this when we studied Bhagavad Gita in chapter 9. We heard a verse in chapter 9 where Krishna says, Avajananti mang mudha. The mudha is the jackass, the fool. Krishna said the jackass, the mudha, is someone who thinks that Krishna is not the Supreme and criticizes Krishna. Yes, avajananti, disrespect Krishna. Let us continue. We feel no greater urgency to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice, nor do we have any personal interest, since we are already seeing your lotus feet. And by your boundless mercy, we have been accepted into your personal association. In this world, there are some whose hearts are contaminated, and who thus think that you are not the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but an ordinary human being. Or else they find fault with you and even criticize you. And this is like an arrow piercing our hearts. So, this is the symptom of a devotee. A devotee is someone who is 100% accepting Krishna as the Supreme. And a devotee cannot tolerate when Krishna is blasphemed or belittled or not properly understood. The devotee feels pain. Why? Because the devotee loves Krishna. We continue with Yudhishthira. And therefore, to extract this arrow from our hearts, we must call to this place, on the pretext of a Rajasuya sacrifice, we must call Brahma, Rudra, and otherwise brahmacharis and demigods who reside throughout the 14 planetary systems. When such an exalted congregation has assembled, it will be incumbent upon them to first arrange for the Agra Puja, or the first worship for the most worthy present in the assembly. And when they are directly shown that you, Lord Krishna, are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then the arrow piercing our hearts will be removed. My dear Lord, those who are constantly in Krishna consciousness and who think of your lotus feet or your shoes are certainly freed from all contamination of material life. Such persons who engage in your service in full Krishna consciousness, who meditate upon you only and offer prayers unto you, they are purified souls. And being constantly engaged in Krishna conscious service, they are freed from the cycle of repeated birth and death. Or, even if they do not want to be freed from this material existence, but instead desire to enjoy material opulences, their desires are also fulfilled by their Krishna conscious activities. In fact, those who are pure devotees of your lotus feet have no desire for material opulences. So this calls to mind a famous verse in the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, when Parikshit Maharaj is inquiring from Shukadeva Goswami. Shukadeva points out that if somebody has specific material desires, Shukadeva points out that for this material opulence you worship this demigod. For this benediction you worship this. He gives a list. But then Shukadeva Goswami says, but actually the intelligent person, and here's the verse, akama sarva kamova moksha kama udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajeta purushang para. So this statement of Shukadeva is, he says, if you're full of material desires, you should worship Krishna. If you are free from material desires, you should worship Krishna. And if you want moksha or liberation, still you should worship Krishna. So that was the opinion of Shukadeva Goswami. Yudhishthira continues. Now, as far as we Pandavas are concerned, we are fully surrendered unto your lotus feet. And by your grace, we are so fortunate as to see you personally. Therefore, naturally, we have no desire for material opulences. The verdict of the Vedic wisdom is that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And I want to establish this fact. And I also want to show the world the difference between accepting you as God and accepting you as an ordinary, powerful, historical person. I wish to show the whole world that one can attain the highest perfection of life simply by taking shelter of your lotus feet, exactly as one can satisfy the branches, twigs, leaves, and flowers of an entire tree simply by watering its root. So we've heard this before. This same statement that Yudhisthira, the analogy he gave, that by pouring water on the root of a tree, the whole tree is nourished. This is also stated by Narada, and I spoke on this verse in a previous class when Narada was preaching to the Pracheta sons of King Prachini Barhishat. The same concept was there, that in order to satisfy the body, you put food into the mouth. You don't try to put food in the various senses. No. The process is you put food in the mouth, it goes to the stomach, and if you have good digestion, then the whole body is nourished. And then he also gave this example of pouring water on the root of the tree. So this is what is Krishna consciousness. Sometimes people ask, why doesn't ISKCON promote the worship of various demigods? This is the reason. We'd have no need to worship the demigods because, as Yudhisthira already pointed out, the demigods are simply part and parcel of Krishna's universal form. So by worshiping Krishna wholeheartedly, all the demigods are automatically taken care of. A devotee does not have to worry about worshiping demigods. This was also mentioned previously when we studied the Govardhan Leela section. One of the reasons that Krishna wanted to make Indra angry was to teach the residents of Vrindavan and subsequently all other devotees that there is no need to worship any demigod. You simply worship Krishna, you will be taken care of. Let us continue. Yudhisthira says now, if one takes to Krishna consciousness, his or her life becomes fulfilled both materially and spiritually. But, my Lord, this does not mean, however, that you are partial to the Krishna conscious person and indifferent to the non-Krishna conscious person. No. Actually, you are equal to everyone. And that is your declaration. Yes. That we studied in Bhagavad Gita also. We studied that point, that Krishna said, I am equal to everyone. But if somebody specifically approaches me, if someone specifically worships me and takes shelter of me, I give that person special attention. Because keep in mind, we also learned in Bhagavad Gita that Krishna does not interfere with the minute free will of the living entity. The living entity is free to act as the living entity wants. There are only two choices: serve and love Krishna or not. So Krishna does not interfere with a particular person's decision not to worship him. But if somebody does worship Krishna, naturally Krishna reciprocates. So we learned that in the Bhagavad Gita. Yudhisthira continues. Actually, you are equal to everyone. That is your declaration. You cannot be partial to one and not interested in others. Why? Because you sit in everyone's heart as the supersoul and give everyone the respective results of his or her fruitive activities. Yes, this has been mentioned many times. Krishna is in the heart of the demon, and Krishna is in the heart of the devotee, equal. And Krishna helps both the demon and the devotee. Sarvasya chaham ridisani vishna mataksmitir jnanam apohanam cha. Equally, Krishna as the supersoul for both the devotee and the demon is giving knowledge, is causing remembrance, and causing forgetfulness. So Krishna is an equal opportunity employer. Prabhupada gives another example which I find to be very useful. So, say the sun is shining midday in the sky. Like today, I went for a walk in the midday with my wife, and the sun was shining. Now, because I came out of my apartment, I got the benefit of the sunshine. If I had stayed in my house, it's not that the sun is being partial. No, I did not take advantage of the sun. So I have nobody to blame but myself if I don't come out. Indeed, there is a Vedic mantra, Tamasi ma Jyotir Gama. Come out of the darkness, go into the light. So that's how Krishna is. Those who take shelter of Krishna, those who worship Krishna, those who love Krishna, they will get the benediction from Krishna, like the sun for those who take a midday stroll. But those who reject Krishna, who stay in their little world of sense gratification, how can Krishna bless them? They don't want to be blessed. Let us continue. Yudhisthira says, you sit in everyone's heart as the supersoul and give everyone the respective results of his or her fruitive activities. You give every living entity the chance to enjoy this material world just as he or she desires. And as the supersoul, you sit in the body along with the living entity, giving one the results of his or her own actions, as well as opportunities to turn towards your devotional service by developing Krishna consciousness. My dear Lord, you openly declare that one should surrender unto you, giving up all other engagements, and that you will take charge by giving one relief from the reactions of all sins. So, Yudhisthira is reminding us of the most important verse in all of Bhagavad Gita. Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam raja aham tvang sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma suchaha. Where Krishna tells Arjuna that Arjuna, you should give up, as it says here, all other engagements, and you should surrender, take shelter of me, mamekam, exclusively. And then mokshayishyami, I will deliver you, sarva papebhya, from all sinful reactions. Let's continue. Still, the living entity remains attached to material activities and suffers or enjoys the reactions without your interference. You are like the desire tree in the heavenly planet, which awards benedictions according to one's desires. Everyone is free to achieve the highest perfection. But if one does not so desire, then your awarding of lesser benedictions is not due to your partiality. We recall when Krishna told his sons the story of, who was that? I can't remember. Somebody who was cursed to take birth as a lizard. I can't remember. So that was actually a great king, and he had so many charity, and he was giving away so many cows in that instance where one cow was given twice. And so when he was sent to Yamaraj, he was given the choice. Well, you have so much pious credit that there's no way of telling how many years of material enjoyment you will enjoy. It cannot be calculated. But instead, he chose, no, first I want to suffer the results of my impious activities so that I can enjoy without interruption. And Prabhupada mentioned at that time that that was less intelligent. But the decision was his. Let us continue. Prabhupada now comments. A desired tree has no material attachments or partiality, but simply bestows its fruits upon those who deserve them, and not upon others. The desired tree does not think, oh, this person is fit to worship me, but that other person is not. No. Rather, a desired tree is satisfied with all who properly serve it. And Lord Krishna acts in the same way. Upon hearing the statement by King Yudhishthira, Lord Krishna replied as follows. My dear King Yudhishthira, O killer of enemies, O ideal justice personified, I completely support your decision to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. And after you perform this great sacrifice, your good name will remain well established forever in the history of human civilization. My dear King Yudhishthira, I may also inform you that all the great sages, your forefathers, the demigods, and your relatives and friends, including myself, desire that you perform this sacrifice. And I think that it will satisfy every living entity. However, I request that you first conquer all the kings of the world and collect all the requisite paraphernalia for executing this great sacrifice. My dear king, let me remind you, your four brothers are direct representatives of important demigods like Vayu, Indra, Yamaraj, and the Ashvani Kumars. And as such, your brothers are great heroes, and you yourself are the most pious and self-controlled king. And therefore you are famous as Dharmaraj. All of you Pandavas are so qualified in devotional service to me that I have automatically been conquered by you. So we have heard this before, that Krishna, one of Krishna's names is Ajita, unconquerable. But as we learned when we studied the Damodarashtakam prayer, and I spoke on the Damodar Leela, Only one thing can capture Krishna. Only one thing can defeat Krishna. And that is love of Krishna. And that love is achieved by rendering service. So, if somebody wants to capture Krishna, if somebody wants to conquer Krishna, if somebody wants to attract Krishna, they have to have this spontaneous devotional love. There is no other option. Lord Krishna told King Yudhisthira that Krishna is conquered by the love of one who has conquered his or her senses. One who has not conquered the senses cannot conquer the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the secret of devotional service. To conquer the senses means to engage them constantly in the service of Krishna. Yes, and there is that famous verse quoted by Lord Chaitanya, a verse by Narada Muni. Narada Muni is the Bhakti Shakti avatar, the empowered incarnation to teach devotional service. His famous verse, Sarva upadi venir muktam tat padat vena nirmalam Rishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchate. So, with the senses, rishikena, with the senses, sevanam. Who do you serve? Rishika Isha, the Lord of the senses, Krishna. You have to become free from material designations. As Krishna first started Bhagavad Gita by telling Arjuna he was not his material body or material mind. So the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita is Sarva Upadi Virnir Muktam, becoming free from all material designations. Tat Padat Vena Nirmalam. Then situate yourself in a pure existence. That means no illicit sex, no intoxication, no gambling, no meat eating. If somebody is willing to live by those 4 prohibitions, then one is basically living a pure life. Then with your senses, you serve the master of the senses, Krishna. Bhaktir uchate. That is a simple definition of bhakti. Prabhupada continues. The specific qualification of all the Pandava brothers was that they always engaged their senses in Krishna's service. One who thus engages his or her senses becomes purified. And with purified senses, the devotee can actually render loving, transcendental service to Krishna and conquer Krishna. Lord Krishna then continued speaking to King Yudhisthira. There is no one within the 3 worlds of this universe, including the powerful demigods, who can surpass my devotees in any of the 6 opulences, namely wealth, strength, reputation, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. And therefore, if you want to conquer the worldly kings, there is no possibility of their emerging victorious over you. Thus, when Lord Krishna encouraged King Yudhisthira, the king's face brightened like a blossoming flower out of transcendental happiness. And thus, Yudhisthira ordered his younger brothers to conquer all the worldly kings in all directions. Lord Krishna thus empowered the Pandavas to execute Krishna's great mission of chastising the infidel miscreants of the world and giving protection to his faithful devotees. That, of course, is in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkrita. In his Vishnu form, Krishna carries 4 weapons in his 4 hands: a lotus flower, a conch shell, a club, and a disc. The club and disc are meant for the infidel miscreants and demons, and the lotus flower and conch shell are meant for the devotees. But because Krishna is the Supreme Absolute, the result of all Krishna's weapons is one and the same. With the club and disc, Krishna chastises the miscreants so that they may come to their senses and understand that they are not all in all, for above them there is the Supreme Lord. By the way, that was the same lesson Indra learned. Indra learned the same lesson. And by bugling with his conch shell and offering blessings with his lotus flower, Krishna always assures the devotees that no one can vanquish them even in the greatest calamity. King Yudhishthira, being thus assured by the indication of Lord Krishna, ordered his youngest brother, Sahadev, accompanied by the soldiers of the Sanjay tribe, to conquer the southern countries. Similarly, Yudhishthira ordered Nakula, accompanied by the soldiers of the Matsya Desh, to conquer the kings on the western side. Yudhishthira sent Arjuna, accompanied by the soldiers of Kekai Desh, to conquer the kings of the northern side, and Yudhishthira ordered Bhimasen, accompanied by the soldiers of Madra Desh, to conquer the kings on the eastern side. It may be noted that by dispatching his younger brothers to conquer in different directions, King Yudhishthira did not actually intend that they declare war upon the kings. Actually, the brothers started for different directions in order to inform the respective kings about Yudhishthira's intention to perform the Rajasuya sacrifice. The kings were thus informed that they were now required to pay taxes for the execution of the sacrifice. By this payment of taxes to Emperor Yudhishthira, it meant that the king accepted subjugation before Yudhishthira. But in the case of a king's refusal to act, there was certainly a fight. Thus, by their influence and strength, the Pandava brothers conquered all the kings and different directions, and they were able to bring in sufficient taxes and presentations, which they brought before King Yudhishthira. Om Tat Sat.